Welcome guys to this semester's edition of Story Behind the Story. It's going to be switched up a little bit. It will just be a YouTube exclusive this semester, so it should be a lot of fun. We're excited for what we have in store for you guys. But anyways, let's get to the whole point. We're here. I'm here with Abby. She had the chance to write a paper for the Northwest Missourian over a Panic at the Disco concert series. A couple of them, not a full series, but we'll just hop straight into that. So kind of tell me a little bit about the experience, what the overview of your article was about.
Well, pretty much, Panic at the Disco is a rock band that's been around for about 15 years. They have a pretty big fan base, and so they were coming to have a concert in both Omaha, Nebraska, which is only about an hour away, and then Kansas City, or a little over an hour, and then Kansas City, which is about an hour away. And so I had heard a decent number of Northwest students were going to be attending, so I actually went myself and kind of got a seed, so the article just kind of helps paint a picture of how the concert was, and I talked to several students about what they thought about it. And
so is this like a concert series, or was it was it a tour, or okay?
They just are on tour now. They just happen to be going to two places that are pretty close.
Okay. I know that normally doesn't happen. Two places in the Midwest, unless it's like Kansas City and St. Louis. Even then, it's still pretty rare. Were there any differences in the concerts? Obviously, when artists go to places, they're like, "We love you, Kansas City." Were they like, "Omaha, you're our favorite. Kansas City, you're our favorite." Were there a lot of those kind of similarities in the concert?
So actually, when I was going, I was curious if that was the case because they almost always claim that concert is the best, the best audience ever. There wasn't too many claims like that, and so from what I can hear, they were pretty similar experiences. Obviously, the audience really makes it, and one of the people I talked to, I went to the concert in Omaha. One of the people I talked to in Kansas City was like, "Oh yeah, the audience wasn't quite as excited dancing as much as it sounds like the ones in Omaha were." But overall...
So did you not go to the one in Kansas City?
I didn't personally go to the one in Kansas City.
Okay. I had a couple of friends that went, so I figured I'd ask you. How many people from Northwest really went to the concert? I know you said you talked to a decent amount of them. Was it like a large sample size, or just kind of a couple here and there? Or?
I don't have numbers for how many total students I went, but I ended up interviewing 3 students for article, but I had got in contact with 5 or 6 originally, just to chat with them because I had heard why rich people were.
Gotcha. And then what was your favorite part about the one in Omaha?
I don't know. It really was just all of their songs are super high energy, so It was just a really concert to be at because they had great lights, he has great vocal control, so it's just really cool.
I went and saw Maroon 5 last year, and there were a lot of people there that said they were kind of Adam Levine and Panic at the Disco were kind of the same, the way that they put on a performance more over just performing music. What was by far your favorite part of this whole experience? Was it being able to talk to a bunch of different people and see their side of it? Was it actually going to the concert itself, or just what really stuck out to you throughout the process of writing this one?
Well, obviously it was really interesting to be able to experience this for myself, but when it came to the writing aspects of it, it was really interesting to kind of get a talk with other students and kind of compare how they kind of viewed the show versus how I just experienced myself, and kind of comparing and compiling an overall view based on so many different viewpoints.
Exactly, because you probably had to figure out, okay, well, I can't just write about my point of view. I have to take everybody else's in as well. But all right, Abby, thank you. That is all the time we're going to have with Abby today. We'll be back in a couple of minutes. Make sure to stick around here on Story Behind the Story, the YouTube exclusive on KNWT. Welcome back, guys, to Story Behind the Story. I am joined by Sammy. She put an excellent piece together about the minimum wage going up, and not only the campus, but the state of Missouri as a whole. So, Sammy, first and foremost, thank you for joining us today. And kind of what was the big overview of your story, just so everybody kind of knows that hasn't read it yet?
Well, thanks for complimenting me, first and foremost.
No problem.
But for the most part, so public universities were one of the few groups that were exempt from the statewide minimum wage rate.
Okay.
Minimum wage
minimum wage
raise that went into effect at the start of the year. But Northwest kind of, not only can they not afford to lose their employees, they really value their employees, and so they wanted to raise the minimum wage as well as Missouri's. That way student employees are getting paid the same as anybody who, say, works in town.
Okay, and then I saw in your article, you guys can check that out there as well, that you mentioned an interesting stat. There's about 950 student employees on campus, and you mentioned how Northwest couldn't really afford to lose them. You also then went on to mention how they pretty much make up for 230 full-time employees. Writing your article, did you really get any cost comparisons of how this would differ from if they were full-time employees to hiring the students?
Not particularly, but I think the most interesting thing that I learned was that student employees actually outnumber faculty and staff. And so without student employees, Northwest doesn't run. They make up the majority of the employees on campus, and they kind of keep the machine running on the logistical side.
Okay. And then you went on to talk about as well, one of the jobs on campus that was affected were the student ambassadors.
Yes.
Can you elaborate on their situation a little bit and how that really affects them?
Yeah, so one of the things that I encountered in my interviews is one of the ways that this year, since it's too late in the year to worry about fees and having to raise the budget in order to accommodate the higher wages, they kind of shifted around the budget and cut some extra hours in certain positions in order to be able to pay students more. And so one of the positions that was impacted was student ambassadors, because they get paid some overtime for working in the office, but those hours were then cut and they're mostly just paid for tours now.
That's what I think it said in your article, only 5 hours a week.
Yeah.
So the girl that you interviewed was talking heavily on how, what if I'm supposed to pay perhaps a car payment this month? What if I'm supposed to pay my electric? Does this really affect any other ones as much as it affected the ambassadors?
I'm not 100% sure. It might. I'm not totally 100% confident on all of the departments that are affected. But I imagine for the most part it mostly affects student employees that work those smaller hours. Like student media, from my perspective, we get paid a limited amount of hours. And that's just our expectation going into it. And so I imagine some of those more full-time student employees are less affected because they depend on their income so much. But the smaller ones that are more like second or third jobs are probably the areas where overtime hours are getting cut.
Gotcha. And then you mentioned how they went on to, or Northwest mentioned how they value their employees, student employees. Do you think this is a step in the right direction? Like, do you see Northwest kind of going up every year with the increments of Missouri's minimum wage?
I sure hope so, but it's one of those things where while they can't afford to lose student employees, they also can't afford in the budget right now to continue raising minimum wage as Missouri's rises, and so they'll really have to work closely with students and Student Senate about whether they're going to have to raise fees in order to afford this, or whether they're not going to keep raising it because they don't have to.
And is that where a lot of the payment option or payment funding comes from, is the student fees?
So there's two sources of payment that incorporates into student employment wages, and a lot of that is fees, which all have to be approved by Student Senate.
And that's just fees every day on campus, like if you lost your key, stuff like that, or is it?
Or fees that are built into your bill at the beginning of the semester, like the technology fee, for example, is approved by Student Senate and is just a flat rate at the beginning of the year.
Gotcha. For anybody that has read the article and has gone through it and everything, what's a very interesting fun fact that you per se couldn't put in the article but would still like everybody to know?
One of the things that I had to cut from my interview with Ashley was a lot of her thoughts about how raising minimum wage affects the standard of living and how it actually doesn't. She has done a lot of research about this, and the fact that raising minimum wage is actually a good thing for the economy. And I thought her perspective was really valuable, and I wish I could have included more of it.
Gotcha. Alrighty. Well, Sammy, thank you for joining us today. Make sure to stick around as we will have Andrew Wagley on here to talk about some sports on the YouTube exclusive KNWT Story Behind the Story. Welcome back to Story Behind the Story for our third and final segment today. I'm joined by Andrew Wegley, who is head sports writer of the
Sports editor.
Sports editor of the Northwest Missourian. My bad. Don't want to discredit you or anything.
I mean, it's basically the same thing.
Okay. But so we are joined by Andrew today to talk a little bit about the Northwest men's basketball team. I will let you break the news. What's the accomplishment that they reached on Tuesday?
Yeah, they're the number one team in the country now after they played like it all year. But the team that was ranked number one, Bellarmine, I believe, we're not sure how to pronounce that yet, but they finally lost the game. So Northwest has just moved up from the 2 spot to the 1. So
yeah, I know they started out the season at 5, have slowly, very slowly, punched their way to the top, and now Ben McCollum's finally led them there. I believe this is the 3rd season in a row that at some point in time they've held the number 1
it's
spot.
actually the 4th season in a row.
4th season.
They held it for 1 week in 16, and then almost all of 17.
And that was the year they won the national championship,
and then,
wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. And then a week last year, and here they are, 2019,
Which
back at it. So.
looks like, not to jinx them or knock on wood, looks like they should hold on to it for at least a few weeks. Heading down the stretch. Has this team really surprised you? I know we were at the same press conference, talked to Coach Mack. I asked him the same question, and he said no. But with all the pieces being gone, what were your thoughts going into this season compared to where they are now?
Yeah, for whatever reason, we've been asking him that question all season. Like, are you surprised at what your team is doing? And he keeps saying no. But I am with the rest of Bearcat Nation. I cannot believe that they're doing what they're doing right now.
You have Trevor Hudgens, Joey Withis, Diego, all of these young pieces, or even if they're not young, some of them necessarily haven't had the playing time that others have had, and players like Trevor, Diego have just flourished naturally into their role, and it's really a beautiful thing to see. Do you think that sky is the limit for this team this year?
I think anything less than, well, I mean, I don't want to say maybe less than national title.
Obviously, if you're a Northwest fan or a sports fan in general, Coach, you're going to say anything less than a national championship is a bust.
Right. Yeah. And I just think that, anything can happen in the tournament, but the way they're playing right now, they're playing like the best team in the country. So it wouldn't surprise me. I don't think it would surprise anyone if they went on a deep postseason run in the NCAA.
Because I think I saw something. They are actually scoring. They're one of the most efficient offenses in all of college basketball this year. D1, D2, D3. They're scoring 1.27 points per possession. If you look at the infamous history of all of the NCAA, the most efficient offense in Division I basketball history finished the season with 1.23. Is this kind of a player situation, or is this something that Coach Mack has really hit his stride on?
Well, it's interesting because they graduated so many good players
Exactly.
last year. They graduated Justin Pitts, who was the Bevo Francis Award winner. He was a 4-time MIAA Player of the Year, so he won it every year. But then they got better, and they graduated the core of that team. They got better, and I think it's because personnel they have, and not necessarily each player individually. It's not that there's there's not one good player, but they just complement each other so well.
And Mac talked about this yesterday, that if Diego's running point or if he's running the 2 spot and he has something going, well, now you have to step out to him. And if you step out to him, now Ryan Welty's open.
Exactly.
And then Joe, there's so many, like you said, there's so many different things that really could happen, and I genuinely think sky's the limit for Coach McCollum's team this year based off of their personnel, the culture that they've built. He said yesterday that they, as a team, really just mesh well together, and I think that's probably one of the most important parts for any team in any sport. So we'll jump now to Joey Withis. You hit on him a little bit in your article. Has he shocked you this year?
I wasn't well versed enough to know. I figured that he would be their best player. I think Trevor Hudgens may have been more the surprise factor, but I don't think anyone expected Joey to be this good. I mean, he's playing like right now. I think he's
James Harden.
If you ask Trevor Hudgens, he's playing like James Harden. But right now, to me, he's playing like the single best player in the MIAA, if not the country.
And Mac knew he was going to be a special player coming in from Minnesota State. He said that yesterday, but even himself didn't think that he was possible of doing the things that he does. He is a nightmare for opposing teams, whether he's stepping out and shooting. Then you got to worry about him doing that, or
Yeah.
the way he stretches the floor in all areas of the game, and then gets back and plays defense.
It's insane because he's 6'7", so he's technically listed. He plays their 5. They play positionless basketball, but he's their 5, but he plays like a guard would in the NBA.
He plays like a
dribbles.
true 2.
Yeah.
If you really had to compare him to somebody, it'd be. I'm not. Trevor, if you're watching this, I'm not making any other comparisons. He can keep James Harden.
I'll go Kevin Love personally.
I was either going to go Kevin Love. Another one, I would gladly put him out there with his cat, Karl Anthony Towns.
That's a bold take.
Somebody that can really stretch the floor. You could possibly say Anthony Davis, not necessarily the length of Anthony
Yeah,
Davis.
he doesn't quite have that same finish that AD does.
But in terms of being a nightmare in every matchup of the floor, without a doubt, Joey gives teams problems.
You can't put if they put their center on him, he's going to go around him. If they put a guard on him, he's going to blow right through him.
Yep.
So there's absolutely nothing opposing defense can do, and that's why he's been so good, I think.
Yeah. So we'll finish it on this note. If you had to take this week as a whole, what do you expect to see from Northwest in their games this week?
I thought last week was kind of, if a team was going to beat them, it was going to be Pitt State or Missouri
Missouri
Southern.
Southern,
And then they beat those two teams by a combined 47 points or something like that. So I would expect, I'm going to say I would expect that they'll go beat Lindenwood and they'll beat Lincoln. Though Lincoln played a tight game with them last week. If you ask Coach McCollum, he'll say, we're going to play tough games, but to him, tough games are apparently 30-point games. So we'll see.
I'm a Kentucky fan. Teams talked about this. Matt Jones, Kentucky radio host, talked about it. He said at the beginning of the year, Kentucky playing okay was almost losing to Southern Miss, and now Kentucky playing okay is them winning by 25. It's almost the exact same thing with Coach McCollum in Northwest. I'm pretty darn excited to see where they end up. If they end up in Indianapolis at the end of the year, or Indiana rather, it would be pretty interesting and fun to say the least. But yeah, Andrew, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
That looks like it's going to be all the time we have on Story Behind the Story this week. Make sure to check us out next week. You can also find us on Twitter, KNWT Channel 8. But remember, this is a YouTube exclusive, so check back here every Thursday morning, and we'll see you guys next week.